We're excited to, we're recording. So I have to say, I got that, got it. Okay, recording for future listening and for those to be shared on the C200 website as well. But I'm delighted to have this conversation today with a C200 member, Victoria Lynden, who's the founder of Kohana Coffee. And it's a space that not very many women are in. And so we're very delighted to have her join us and give some of her exciting information about the industry and also about her journey in that. Also, if you'll turn off your mics and all that, because we are recording, I would appreciate that. So just very quickly, my name is Gaddis. A few years ago, I was the chair of C200, and one of the things that I have enjoyed so much about the organization is the fact that we are entrepreneur and corporate. I come from an entrepreneur background. I founded and recently sold what was the largest woman-owned advertising agency in the country. And since then, I have had my wonderful rebirth of my art career. I'm a painter, you can see in my gallery, and I'm doing some women's leadership training at the University of Texas and beyond that. So that's, I think once an entrepreneur, you're always an entrepreneur and always starting new things. But the exciting thing is that C200 does celebrate both corporate women and entrepreneurs, and it's a great way that we exchange information. And so I'd like to give you a little bit of information about Victoria before we jump into our questions. She's a respected and actually renowned international businesswoman. And as I said, really a global influencer. Victoria is the founder of Kohana Coffee, and she's been at the global forefront of many markets for a long time, and has formed formal alliances with over 50 countries. So she's truly an international star for us. She has this ability to identify trends, and that's so important as an entrepreneur. I think trends are everything when you're in an entrepreneurial space, is to watch what's going on and take advantage and leap on those opportunities when they come. So being a visionary and looking at trends is part of who she is. Under her leadership, Alliance Abroad established itself as a best-in-class organization, renowned for its dedication to the sustainable and ethical development of new global markets. And so in her enterprise, Kohana Coffee, she's been a 3-time recipient of Inc. Magazine's fastest growing private food and beverage companies. And her brand sources of all its beans are from women growers. So we really want to celebrate the fact that she has not only been an entrepreneur, but she has continued to lift up and support women on an international basis. So with that background, let's just jump into the fireside chat with our friend Victoria Lynden. And then I do want all of you to know that we can ask questions and have a real informal discussion at the end. But let me just toss a few things out to her to start off with. Victoria, welcome. How are you this morning or today, this afternoon?
Thanks, Guy, and thank you all for being here. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what it's like, not only as a female entrepreneur in coffee, but also just the coffee sector itself.
So how did you get into the coffee business in the first place? Give us the background.
Sure. So, I mean, it truly is that case of that accidental manufacturer. So I had been, in my international business for about 25 years, and I wanted something different. So I had started a wine bar restaurant actually in Austin, just to kind of, deflect and say I could do something else. But before it opened a soft launch, I decided to take a quick trip. So I went to Hawaii, and I was on the North Shore. And at this point, I really was burnt out, right? Because I still was managing CEO of my international. I never ventured in the restaurant business. And I was like, okay, I have to take a deep breath. And I was riding a moped on the North Shore, and it was a torrential downpour. And I pulled off to this coffee shack. And once I went inside, you could smell the coffee, the caffeine was, pulsing through my body. But kind of ironically, I really slowed down because it transported me back to my childhood. I grew up with my mother who had that metal steel percolator on the stove. And from the time I woke up, the fragrance would be, kind of wafting in the air until the very last thing. She would have a pot of coffee at like 10 o'clock at night. And so it was something that was always very soothing to me. So at that point, I had met the guy who was there that was a roaster, and really just by coincidence, he happened to have got his grad degree from UT. And so we just started talking about coffee. And I had mentioned that, yes, I was starting, this restaurant, and I really needed an espresso shot. And at that time in Austin, the most popular flavors were Snickerdoodle and Texas pecan. And I said, I'm not quite sure what to do or how to source this coffee. So with his help, John, he taught me how to be a roaster. So I came back to Austin and ordered a roaster, which I had no idea what it was. He just said, trust me. And this was like a big red fire engine that it would not fit in the restaurant. So I had to get another space to put it to roast the coffee. And from there, it was just a matter of time. We started roasting coffee for the restaurant and market. That Whole Foods came and they were interested in the coffee. So we started roasting for not only the restaurant, but all the local places in the Southwest region. And on a hot, hot day, we were in the parking lot of Whole Foods celebrating the Founders Day. And I was pimping hot coffee, which nobody wanted. It was about 110 degrees. So I had remembered, growing up, with my mom, as a child, coming home every day to Sun Tea, where she put those Lipton iced tea bags in the glass bottle, and we would drink it. It was really smooth. So I just kind of pivoted and remembered that and created, before cold brew was cold brew, this liquid-based coffee drink by brewing it exactly as you do Sun Tea. And from that, it exploded.
So let's go back and talk about the coffee industry. It's interesting how you even got into it. And isn't it always interesting how sometimes our childhood informs what's going to happen to us later? And you talked a lot about your childhood and the memories and all those things, but it creates passions inside us. And we could talk about that for a long time. But what makes the coffee industry so challenging? It's such a saturated and crowded space. So why even go there?
Why even go there? So yes, first, it's very challenging. I mean, I think we have to remember that coffee is the most traded commodity in the world, right? And there's over 2 billion cups of coffee that people drink every day. And the biggest issue is just the sustainability, because most of the coffee that we enjoy is specialty coffee, is Arabica coffee. And it comes from this really genetically weak plant, right? So that the problem is they haven't introduced new varietals. So with just climate change, with differing weathers, with pests and bugs, it makes coffee in and of itself very challenging because you can't control the growth of the coffee trees. And then inherent in that is also that, almost worldwide, there's 5 major players. It's almost like a monopoly. So if you think who brings in the most coffee anywhere, the multinational companies really are. Number 1 is actually McDonald's for their McCafe. All right. So for specialty coffee, they take the largest. You have obviously Starbucks. You have, J&B, which owns Keurig, Pete, and all that. So entering into it, there's only a small space. And I think that, for me, it was interesting to look at what was that niche that was available, how to go about it. And that's really before people even knew what cold brew was. They were used to iced coffee. We started to, make cold brew before it was popular. And I think that allowed us to enter kind of into the back door of this market.
Very cool. Well, we talked a little bit when we introduced you about spotting trends. So how would you advise anyone, and how do you stay ahead of current trends? How do you keep innovating? That's what everyone always talks about, but you've obviously done this. So tell us some secrets about how you stay ahead of trends and how you watch it.
I think that what I learned over the years is that often we try to look for trends within our own industry. And the reality is it was looking for all other industries and what's happening, right? So for, coffee, you can think of it as a beverage, but looking at how to be innovative or spot the trends, it's what's happening in other sectors, right? So not only fashion and design and art and technology, and during this time, especially now, a lot of it is around health and wellness and convenience. And it changed. So even looking at coffee, it's kind of like, if you have, wine and cheese. And so you have your bread and you have your cheese, right? So that the bread just becomes a vehicle for whatever you're going to put on it. So the cheese are the things. So really it was taking, coffee and saying, coffee is a beverage, it's a liquid. And I had to really move away from it had to have a specific taste or flavor that we're all so accustomed to, because what the trends are showing now is really this big emphasis on health and convenience. So a part of it now is looking at functional beverages. How can you add turmeric to coffee? How can you add collagen, especially women that are busy? They want their vitamins, they want everything, and a better for you, all in their quick, convenient, coffee ready to go. So it's kind of looking at what's happening, I think, on a global basis in all industries, and see how could that impact, what you're producing or what service you're providing.
Yeah, and one thing we mentioned earlier too is that you've included women in this. And as C200 members, as women business leaders, I think a lot of times it's about how we're going to expand the reach through our influence to help more women and pull them forward and give them opportunities. So talk to us a bit about why you think that's important and what you've done to include women in your adventures.
So especially the coffee industry, and what is interesting to note is that 70% of all labor in the coffee industry is female, but they make 10% of the revenue. So this is from growers to pickers to producers to importers, to say that, you can say it's a male dominated industry, but quite frankly, it's women who run the, coffee industry. So, and then to know that, again, with the equity of saying everything that they're doing, they benefit 10%. So from, the side of the company and where we're at, what we've done is that we've sought out female coffee growers, producers, and the like, and pay them a premium on their coffee. So whatever they would get in the market, again, all their coffee is collected. Most of the time it's going to go through these exchanges where the men run them, and they get a certain percentage on it. So what we've done is really sought them out and say, whatever they get from the exchange, that we want to pay them, whether it's 5 cents a pound, 10 cents a pound, so that they're getting the premium on that. In addition, it's looking at what did they want? I mean, one of the biggest things everybody always says is, how do you help? It's kind of like if you're volunteering, you're giving, you're helping, but the women are never asked what do they want, right? So it could be, hey, I'm from one of my competitors or anyone, you need a new tractor, right? Or you need equipment. And having the conversations with the women, myself directly, what they wanted was extra money for childcare, right? Because they were they were working the farm, they're in agriculture at night, and they're worried about who is watching their children, were their children safe, how would they be accompanied? So all of these, perceptions of this is what they need, again, from a male perspective of they need equipment, they need this and this. And the reality is, because they're doing the work, they are the ones that are also bringing home the majority of the income. They still were missing, what anybody as a mother, or a parent would want is, how are we looking after the education and the well-being of their children? So through that kind of grassroots level, it's also saying, how do we give the money so it goes directly, to the female, women-owned co-ops, so that they can decide, what they want to do with the money instead of what we're doing. So huge advocates, we try to campaign for them. We try to work with the Women's Coffee Alliance, and on the other side of working with women-owned, importers that are bringing the coffee into the U.S., as well within, my own company of always seeking out, if we have an opportunity between a female or a male of a CEO or any position, certainly leaning in towards the females to hire them.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that kind of leads to my next question, which is, and you've kind of discussed this already, but expand on your thoughts on social responsibility and how you feel that as a female entrepreneur.
So, gosh, that's kind of a tough question, only in that I'm not sure that there's a gender line, right, of female social responsibility versus male responsibility. And I have to go back to say, I don't think about it that much, only because of how I was raised by my mother. So my mother was a single mother of 4, and we grew up like volunteering in Cabrini Green in the housing projects in Chicago. We had homeless, we did everything. So from early on, it was, how are you changing where you live, your community? How are you being, a steward? So I think that if you actually have to put, a plan in place, I'm not sure how authentic it would be. So I think that, by showing up and looking at, what are we doing for the people, within the coffee community, again, whether overseas or here, what are we doing with, profits we make? How are we putting things back? How are we educating? I think that, honestly, it's just showing up how my mom would expect me to show up.
That's cool. I love that. So you created this, you've gone through several iterations in your career as an entrepreneur already. What's next? What do you plan to do next, and what's on the horizon for you?
My hope would be that from here would to do something with the coffee in a more philanthropic way. So, we've started to, the bones of coffee for change, right? So that we can, solicit, whether it's on e-commerce or other places, to be able to sell the coffee, with the coffee really being the give back. So using all types of, organizations, other ventures to say, how can we come together and say, let's give back to the community? So as far as the coffee goes, and then I think in a general picture, I think that I still, I'd love to be an entrepreneur in residence for a company that's not my own company, right? What would it be like to, experience something, where I'm not necessarily in charge. And then of course, as time comes to, be able to sit on boards to be able to give back.
Exactly. So more of an entrepreneurial type endeavor, perhaps, which, always leads me to this. And how did you fund your, I didn't put this in your questions ahead of time, but now I'm really curious about how you have funded your business and how that worked for you, because there's a lot of different ways for entrepreneurs to get there, but I'd be curious for you to describe that journey.
Sure. So again, I've been blessed by saying I've had several companies going on at once. So they've all kind of helped, one helps the other, as they go cycle. But to start with, I would say it was probably one of the most challenging things that I did not anticipate is the difficulty of being a female entrepreneur to go to a bank, right? To raise money or to do that. I mean, I sat around, and even, 20 years later, many roundtables where I am the only female there, and I am in front of bankers. I'm in front of people, investors and M&A, and I am the only female in the room. And I think that the standards seem quite higher than my male counterparts. Just again, knowing from where they succeeded and I did not. So in the initial part of raising the money gate, I had a small SBA loan, and that's how it was kind of like the seed money. And the SBA loan was geared towards startup women in business.
Yeah, I believe it or not, many years ago, I took out an SBA loan to buy my first piece of real estate for our office. And, it was an interesting journey even to do that, but that did help us to kind of establish ourselves. So sometimes those SBA loans can actually come in quite handy, and people don't think about them sometimes as a way to get funded. So when and how do you think about this? Decide when to sell or leave your companies, or when you start something, because that's always a huge dilemma. Sometimes it's very obvious for people, but other times it's a really tough decision to make. So how have you handled that?
I think as an entrepreneur, you almost have to start a business knowing that you have an exit plan. And so that it has to have some type of transactional phase. And that's either going to be, you have successors. So whether they're family members, whether they're, trusted, employees that you want to give it to, or you'll do an exit. And I would say with all of my businesses, and they've all been different, right? Different passion plays on my heart, right? So the ones that I love the most are the ones that I hang on to more. And, it's easier to detach to those that you're like, okay, I'm ready. But I think it's really critical to know, especially when you're growing, right? Because nobody wants to sell the company when it's doing well. Everybody, when they're either done, or that because of financial reasons, quite often is when they start really contemplating it. But I think it's really critical to look at. And when I started, it's always like, who would I want to sell this company to? And then I had to kind of pivot and model the company towards that, right? So if I think now, like for Kohana Coffee, who would be the end buyer? So let's just say it could be someone like Green Mountain, or it could be Nestle. Then I have to start thinking, what's their mission statement? How do they operate? What do they do? What markets? Because they would be interested in me as a bolt-on, as a part of their company. So that influences a lot of decisions, of what I'm making in any company, to know who's the end exit, buyer, and then what is the strategy so that I can become more aligned like that, 1, 2 top companies, versus just trying to say, hey, what I'm doing is enough that will be attractive for whatever multiple.
Victoria, that's really good advice, especially for starting entrepreneurs, because many times you kind of leap into an opportunity, or you see something and you don't really have an end game, and you don't really have a strategy on how to get out. So I think that all of us need, if you are an entrepreneur, if you're coaching or mentoring entrepreneurs, you need to talk to them about that, because you can get really attached to a business. It's really hard sometimes to let go. I mean, I understand. I've been down that path myself. And so but we always need to think, what is going to be that exit strategy? It's just as if we're on a board and we're planning, with the company, who's going to be your successor? What's the succession plan? How are we going to make this thing go on and get the most value, or shareholders' value, out of it? So that's very good advice. And one thing I've seen is some entrepreneurs just don't look that, thing in the eye and say, hey, we've got to get out of here at some point, or someday this is all going to need to change. So it's really good advice for an entrepreneur that we need to take to heart. So to go back, you talked a little bit about being the only woman in the room, and sometimes, sitting there with investors or bankers or doing all those things. Do you want to talk about any particular hurdles you had, especially in this industry, being a woman? What was the toughest thing you had to deal with?
I think that I'm going to preface it by saying not only being a female entrepreneur, but being a mom, right? So I have 2 girls. And I think that, one of the biggest hurdles was, understanding how to balance my time and, for the people. So both the little people and the big people, the clients, and looking at, again, hindsight is always 20/20, but how do you manage and run, your company, and how are you being taken serious when you're in a big meeting, all of a sudden you have a call that, the little one has to be picked up from school, right? Sick, or things like that. I think that it's also a constant, the biggest hurdle I would say in an industry that's especially male dominated is the constant having to reprove yourself over and over again. That, there's these real subtle, innuendos of, are you as good? Can you come to the table as strong as, they can? And being taken serious. And I felt that it was only when I had to be characterized as where they would consider demanding or, bitchy, that they're like, oh, this isn't just a lifestyle hobby, little company you have, or this is what's going on. That, whether it was sitting around the table with banks, investors, or any of that, of trying to understand that, I do have the tools and the wherewithal to scale this, and to scale it from, 6 figures to 8 or 9, figures, but to every single time have to go back and reprove. Yes, this is what I've done to date. Yes, this is what we're doing. I think that is, still today, one of the biggest challenges.
You used a word that was always very prevalent in my career, and that is the word scale. And one of the things that was, as I grew my company, there was always that question on the client side. Well, can you scale the business? And I don't know that they would have asked a man that, but I mean, they were always saying, if we're going to give you this business, are you going to be able to meet the challenges, grow it, be in our market? Do we need to do? And that was the first question I always got when we had these big opportunities at a Fortune 100 company. And I could almost guarantee that was what they would say when I walked in the room is, oh, you're gonna be able to scale the business. So that's a very important thing. And I do believe it's something that women probably get thrown at them a lot more than men. And maybe we deserve it, because you look at a lot of the female entrepreneurs and some never make it over $1 million in sales. So maybe they're, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot, some of us, by saying, hey, we don't want to scale the business. We like being smaller. So that's an interesting concept that I believe that women need to really be prepared to deal with, because it's going to come up, and that's the only way that you're going to get the big opportunities, is saying, yeah, we're out there, we're going to scale with the big guys or whoever. We've talked a lot, about your challenges and some of the things that you've shared with us, which are very valuable, but there's got to be some successes there that you love, and we all have our day in the sun. So tell us about some of the good things and the successes that you've seen along the way that maybe others could be inspired by.
Absolutely. And I think that it is that also, the attitude of, I'm grateful for all the small wins, right? And only because I think as entrepreneurs too, sometimes we get the biggest wins and we're like, okay, that's fine, let's move on, right? Because we constantly are pushing ourselves beyond, of what it is. And I think that, the wins for me are saying, hey, look, we created a shelf-stable coffee product that's cold brew, that's not heated. There's no one that has done that. Not Starbucks, not Nestle, no one. So we created something that I feel, again, has the foundation of growing up with my mother, who coffee was the elixir to everyone's soul, right? You'd come over and have a coffee with my mom, neighbors and friends and family. So to me, it's born out of like a real love that I have. And so to be able to say, no one's done it. No one has been able to come into the market and say, hey, we can produce the same product without heating it up or putting chemicals. I feel proud of that, and I feel really good that, my kids, other people can drink, a product that tastes great and that really is good for you. So I think that is a, real win. I think that, in my international part of my career, after many, many years, we won this award that was based in Africa of making a difference in people's lives, right? Of being change agents. So it was so different than being it based on, what is the net profit or where are we at or numbers, but it was saying that, by actively listening and being a part of, this community for over 30 years, that in the end, that was my win, and say, hey, that would be the legacy, to say, just kind of showing up and taking care of, these international students and citizens like they were your own family, and to be recognized for that was a big win.
Yeah, that's exciting. And not all of us have the opportunity to touch lives on an international basis. And so that has to be very rewarding for you, that you kind of went beyond our own coast and were able to touch many people around the world. So let's go to this. Everyone always likes to know this, but you may have more than one piece of advice, but is there one or two pieces of advice that really stick in your mind that you would pass on to other people that you've gotten along the way?
I think that if I have to look at what was the best advice given to me, probably, pardon me, two parts. One is a phenomenal entrepreneur in New York who used to be a concert pianist had said to me, it's all about give, give, get, right? And so we went through a lot of iterations and examples of, whenever you're talking with something, it's always, what do they want from you, right? Instead of saying, now I've opened so many doors by not saying, hey, Gay, can you do this for me? But I know about you. I would like to, offer this to you. And, and in return, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I think that we're so inundated, especially as, CEOs, executives, and all that we're always asked, right, to give something, to give our time, to donate, to do all that. And what a pleasure and blessing it is when someone wants to give something to us, right? And even the smallest thing, you want to have people who literally come to say, I'm going to bring you a coffee, right? Because I know you don't have time to come to a coffee meeting. I'm going to bring you the coffee. I'd like that. And I would like to just ask you one question, right? So it's that giving. And I think that has been the premise really of my business for the last 10 years, is looking at, as soon as someone is asking me something first, that go to the bottom of my list, right? But as soon as someone's putting in there and it's a way where I feel that there's some reciprocity, I think that it's opened a lot of doors, and with networking. And I would really say, hey, that's great advice. The other would be, we talked about having the financials when you're opening your business or starting, and challenges. I think you have to always be willing to pivot, and it's that grit to say, you can have the best idea, you can have it, trust and confirmed, but maybe the marketplace, or maybe, lack of capital, or whatever it is, that you can't be so attached, to your ego of what that is. You have to be able to say, we can pivot, because how we're pivoting is going to give us the long-term sustainability.
That's great. I really love what you said about the giving, because we all know that feeling. You get emails and calls and everything because you get to a certain place in your life and people are always asking you. And I always like to try to help whenever I can, but you can be inundated with that. And I think all of us could kind of change our thinking a little bit and say, if we approach someone, what are we going to do for them? And, that brings up a concept that, in my opinion, men have a little bit more of a grasp on than some women, and I won't say all, but several. And that is a concept of reciprocity. And men kind of have that, I'm going to do this for you, you do this for me. And it's not always the ask, it's kind of, we're going to give and take, and therefore we all move ahead. But sometimes women forget that. That it's a little bit harder sometimes for women to feel like, okay, I can ask you for that but then I'll do this for you. So it's an interesting concept. I love the idea of what can you give to somebody when you approach them in a business deal or just in a relationship of any kind. And sometimes I think we've been closer maybe to some of our relatives than we have been in a long time. And maybe we need to go home after this, think, what can I give to my significant other or my child or whatever that I didn't do or I haven't done because I just didn't think about it. So that's a really good piece of advice on all levels. If we would like to, I think we have a few folks still on. I'd love to open it up for any questions we have. Not, I've got a lot more for Victoria, including, and I will end with this in a minute, I wanted to know how she ended up in Austin, Texas, because there's not a lot of C200 members in Austin, and we were glad to have her join our small ranks there, but we'll talk about that in a minute after we take any questions from all of you that are on the call, or anybody have something to add.
I have a quick question, Gay,
Sure.
for Victoria.
Okay.
My name is Marissa Wilk, and I am partnering with a few individuals on some technology startup ideas. But first of all, thank you both for hosting today and sharing your knowledge. Really appreciate it. I'm curious, for Victoria, have you considered becoming a certified B Corp? And if so, can you share more about that experience? And if not, why not?
Okay, that's a great question. And I have to laugh because I'm a double Gemini. So there's this part of me that's always, you should be B Corp. And I have the other hat that says you need to be profitable. So actually, yes, I'm actually friends, with the women who are in charge of B Corp. And I looked at it, and for, I think for certain businesses, or of my businesses, it would have worked well. You have to, on the B Corp, right? You can only have a certain percent from the very top to the very lowest of salaries. And so the problem or challenge was that the people who were actually in these roles, so exclude myself, right? Because I can get paid other ways through this, that I could not decrease their salary enough to meet the middle to qualify. I would have to raise the very low salaries almost double to triple to get where they were. So to have the talent of the people who were going to be the management, Marissa, of it, that was all the other parts were wonderful. And it's really a great organization. The big challenge was I'm going to say the salary disparity based on people's experience, because I could have someone that, is a top level, 20-year executive at a level that then I had to bring someone who had only been out of school a couple years really far up there. And we couldn't quite figure out how to make that equation work.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else want to jump in or have a comment?
I was just curious, Victoria, I never asked you this. We've been on a couple of calls, but how many people do you employ in the coffee company? Coffee, just the coffee. And are they all located in the US or are they in Latin America? Where are they?
Thanks, Steve. So in the coffee Kohana itself in the US, it's about 100 employees. And the majority of them are located in the East Bay area in California. That's where our manufacturing plant is. So the majority are there. And then we have others that are, in Austin, other places around. Overseas, actually, we have a small office that's based in Shanghai. And they are there because they're the ones that help source some of the raw materials, as well as they're the ones that are going to, especially now with supply chain issues, they will go and they will help organize in Asia. How are we getting the materials by boat, by plane, by things like that? But on the ground, we work directly with farmers. So we'll work with farmers in Honduras and Peru, but we don't have our own staff that's physically there.
Victoria, it's been really inspiring listening to your story about your journey and some of the challenges you face, especially, the stories about being the only woman in the group with investors. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this with our experience, and yes, a lot of heads kind of nodding, right? We've all been there. Can you talk a little bit about how C200 helped you in your journey? Was there any particular examples besides just kind of the moral support and the delight of talking to all these incredible women, but was there anything practical that you pulled from being a part of the organization?
And it's great to see you. And I was going to say, you're a big part of my inspiration as well. We happen to be on committee together. I think that first, I'm very new to C200. However, I will tell you, even in the last 6 to 9 months, it's been so critical to what I'm doing with Kohana, because on the manufacturing console, for example, one of my questions had to do with, we couldn't find labor. We couldn't find, temporary day labor. So talking to, Hannah, who's dealing with that on a 10x ratio, she right away gave me her resource. And I want to let you know that for 1 year, myself and the senior executives called every staffing temp agency in the state of California without success. She got me directly into, her contact, and we started, using that immediately to do that. I've used C200 for looking at, it saved me a lot of legal fees and help with some support of policies, operational policies. We were talking about, hey, what do you do now with this hybrid model of going back to work or to your office? We talked about what is it like in manufacturing to require vaccines, right? So all of that, I would say that it has, I wish I would have known the right questions to ask when I first started C200. I also wish, that I knew more of, hey, these are all the different groups, that it wasn't just based on, demographics. And, Gay had shared that when I first started, look, there's nobody in Texas, right? Well, there's a couple now, but to really be able to plug into, what other people challenges, because a lot of times, a lot of these new groups are about good things, or, hey, I'm on this board, or I got this opportunity. But what was refreshing is this is my challenge, and to be able to go around the room and say, what is your challenge? I know someone who can help you. Then that goes back to my original of the difference between maybe the fraternal, like, you have all the groups from EO, YPO, all these things that are very, very male group, and they'll pick up the phone, like you said, hey, I'm going to help you, then you'll help me. And I didn't find that with all types of female networking groups that I, was in. And C200 has been the first group where you can literally say, I have a problem. Does anybody know, have they faced this? What worked or what didn't? And I think that has been a real game changer for me, especially the last 6 months.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because it certainly has meant a lot to me, and it is. And what makes it work, I think, is because we are, as C200 members, we've all reached a certain pinnacle of success, and so you can look around and you can probably find someone who's been through something pretty similar, because we are more of a peer-based group than a lot of other organizations. So that's good to know. I'm glad to hear you say that. Any other questions or comments, or anyone want to add anything? Well, while we're thinking about that, Victoria, I do have a question. You were in Hawaii, you had this epiphany, all these things happen. Why did you start this restaurant? What made Austin, Texas interesting to you? And of course, I'm interested because I'm a Texan and I'm from Austin, but I'm kind of curious. You were in the Bay Area, correct? And had your business there. So tell us why Austin?
When I was looking at different cities to move my international company to at that time, it was just after, El Nino, and I had a house where the sidewalk collapsed, and I went outside, and all of a sudden there's, this huge sinkhole. So at that time, I decided it would be a good time to relocate. And so we were looking at what was the population, right? So what type of business or industry? And I found Austin was very similar actually to Palo Alto. I mean, a lot of same type of businesses. There was a lot of IT, there was technology, there was banking, there were startups. And I felt that it was the closest to the environment that I was in, as well as there was a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs. I felt that Austin really welcomed female, male. I felt that the city, and there's a lot of, at that time, classes you could take at UT, take, workshops. And so I felt it was really inviting. I also loved the weather after I had lived in rain for years. Texas is mostly the droughts, except for the floods, as you know. So I thought I loved the climate.
That's good. Well, we welcome you. And anyone who wants to come to Texas, it's been a great place for me to do business, although I did have offices around the country. Anyone else have a question before we'll wrap up a little early if we need to, but I want to make sure everyone's had a chance to either comment or say something or throw in a question if you'd like to now. Well, then, if not, I will say, Victoria, is there anything else that you'd like to leave this group with, or others who may be watching? Because, as we said, this is recorded, and so it has a long shelf life, so to speak, and so we hope that everyone will, really enjoy listening to Victoria's story, the courage that she has had in an industry that was male-dominated, and just her ingenuity about how to do something. And I want to reiterate one thing she said, because one of the most interesting, exciting things on an entrepreneurial journey is to do something that hasn't been done, to crack the nut, to do something and bring something out to market that no one has been able to do. So you, in your success story, told us about that, and that has to be very gratifying for you to leave that mark, that something was created because of something you started. So is there any last words you'd like to give of wisdom for anyone out there on the entrepreneurial journey, or just in business at any pace?
I think that I would leave it. Let me see if I can hold this. let me see if we can hold up this. So
Right.
but why I'm holding that up is because what I'd like to share is actually for anyone who's on here, I'd love to send you some coffee product and recipes. And people always wonder like, hey, what do you do with coffee concentrate, for example? So that bottle has over a pound of coffee in it. It's just coffee and water. But in the morning, my favorite recipes are, like we'll take that with a banana and throw in almond milk, soy milk, some protein powder, and ready to go. And at the same time, my favorite recipe at night is the, like sundowner that you'll have in Africa, where I'll take cold brew, with Kahlua or another, any type of coffee type of alcohol with that and hot chocolate. And it's delicious. So all the time, everybody's like, you can use it for different type of cooking recipes, but certainly we'll share with you and your code of there's all types of recipes and things that you can use, as a marinade. And I'd love to get any feedback on things that you would, use it to make drinks or to cook with. And, as we're going forward too, is that it's not, again, we talked about what can you do or how are you doing innovation, is looking at something like that. I'm going to show you here is this RTD, this ready to drink, and it's made with, this one has the, oat milk, the vanilla, the turmerics, and all the things like that. It's just watching what's on the market now, because that's also showing a big part of this health and wellness is towards people having more, consciousness towards what they're putting in their body because of the mental health, right? So less of a caffeine, like people want calmer. So that's kind of what led to this, and where we're seeing new things going is that people don't necessarily want to be all caffeinated up right now. They actually want a little bit, but what they want is more of a balance. And so it'd be interesting to watch the trends that we're going to see launch in 2022.
Exactly. So if we all want a taste of your cold brew or what's your...
I get your emails and I'm happy to send you some cold brew coffee and some of my favorite recipes.
I hope Allison or one of our C200 office staff can help us with that and make sure we all connect. That's a very nice offer. So you're giving us something, you're showing us your example of giving, and we appreciate that. But sounds good. I'd love to try some. And we hope that everybody will share a recipe and do that, because I know Victoria loves to see new ways that she can bring coffee ideas out to the world. So thank you so much, Victoria. We really appreciate your time today, your insights, your courage, and for being a C200 member and for being an entrepreneur that we can all be proud of as members and see what's next. So thanks again. And I think that we said, okay, Susan said thank you. So again, thanks to all of you who participated today. And again, if you enjoyed this session, you might want to direct people to the website so that they can view the recording and take advantage of this wonderful word of wisdom or two from our friend Victoria. So thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to more exciting programs from C200. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.